Hi, my name is Martha, and welcome back to my BookTube channel. Today, I'm going to be doing doing a review of the books that I read in 2022. Last year, I only read 17 books out of my goal of 20. I think this has me rethinking whether I should do a goal this year, and what is the point of these goals anyway, other than putting unnecessary pressure on ourselves. But I like the tracking bit of, reading, like tracking what I've read, how much I read, and blah, blah, blah. But goal setting is a bit, I feel like it's competitive. But maybe that's a whole other video for another day. The first book I read was The God-Pleasing Crown by Mo Xiang-Tong Xu. This is part of the Heaven Officials Blessings, which starts from this book, if you have the physical copy, and concludes in this book. I don't know why the physical books didn't follow the same arcs as the web novels did, but the way I tend to read them as they were, as was intended by the author. So that was the second book. Well, I don't know if there's anything much to say about it. All I can say, it was a massive flashback centered around this one event that the author had envisioned herself starting the entire series on, and it was just a lot of info dumping and probably more world building that maybe wasn't necessary, but we just stay here for the characters. The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo. I didn't understand what this book was trying to say because it was buried in purple prose. I didn't understand what the characters were, what the plot was. There were, I think I recall, there were quite a number of poems and songs and metaphors, and I just didn't understand what you were trying to say. Sorry, darling. The Color Purple by Alice Walker. This is what I call, in fact, I have it here. This is what I call one of the foundational texts for womanism, and it's such a profound story that encapsulates the life of a Black woman in the past and in the present. And it's just an honest depiction of what Black life was. And I feel like this is like the mother of all other books about Black women that has followed. Like, everybody is trying to chase Alice Walker, how she wrote in AAVE, and the female characters specifically. But I just loved it, and I love all the characters. And even if I didn't agree with some of their choices, it's such a great classic. Circe with Madeline Miller. This should be no surprise that I did not like it, because I only picked it up off the back of the Song of Achilles, which I haven't completed, and it's giving me less confidence to complete because I disliked this book. Madeline Miller is talented, and you can tell this is a gifted writer. This is someone who writes properly, but Circe is just wasn't enough for me. Like, this is one of those background characters who've been brought to the front, but I think her narrative was so wrapped up in pushing the heroes that hers was ignored, and that was still reflected here. I don't think Madeline did enough for me to lift her out, and I think it was the bare minimum. If this was supposed to be a feminist take on Circe and supposed to show her as this strong person who was always hiding standing by the wall, the wallflower at the party, it didn't show. She was still an instrument in Odysseus' story, in Icarus' story. I mean, maybe it was to show the importance of her role in those other stories, but I didn't care, honestly. Especially when Odysseus entered, I felt like this was the Song of Achilles Part 2. And you could have done without that. The Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives by Lola Shonein. This is a funny Nigerian dramedy about these, was it 4 wives who have very dark pasts, and it was a delight and also very traumatic to read. I think it's best read via audiobook, and that's how I consumed it, and I really enjoyed it because it sounded like a Nigerian, like a Nollywood movie. Actually, Like You Love Me, I don't have the author's name, but this is a rom-com Korean webtoon that I just read to pass the time. It's about an actor who meets this girl, and she has a voodoo doll of him and tries to control him using the voodoo doll, and hijinks ensue and love happens and whatever. But it was good, but it's not that great. But it's like, it's nice, I'd say. Luster by Raven Leilani. This is also buried in purple prose and metaphors, and it's struggling to say something which I thought I understood, but also it's burying what it's trying to say. And I could have appreciated less references to Twitter, and I don't know, maybe it's something like millennial writers are trying to find a unique way of writing, rather than the traditional way books are written. You're trying to, I don't know, make your writing style artistic, and sometimes that can lose a lot of people, because I feel like books are the most straightforward form of art, as opposed to music or fine art. But whatever, do what you want, write what you want. But this was a bit, something was a bit skewed in what it was trying to say. But at the end of it, I think it was still trying to portray a picture of a Black woman in poverty, a 20-year-old who is struggling to find her way, and somebody who is ultimately very, very messy. The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. This was an absolute slog to go through. This I could have done without reading this book. I was forced to by my book club, and I didn't even finish it in time for the discussion, which whatever. And I'm a completionist, and that's why I finished it. This was ultimately saved by the fact that I listened to it via audiobook, and Julie Whelan is an excellent narrator, but this could have been magic in someone else's hands and not in V. Schwab's hands. And I don't know, maybe V. Schwab suffers from having very good premises which aren't executed that well, or maybe it's just me and I just don't like her writing. And for those who like her writing, have fun, go to town with it. The Perfect Nine by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. This book was by the way, it was too expensive it's a short book. I think, is it 300 pages? And Ngugi wa Thiong'o, you're selling this thing at 3,000 because you went to America and sold it there first before you brought it to Kenya. Anyway, shade aside. This is a book about sisterhood and comradeship, and it is based on the creative myth of the Agikuyu community, and I listened to it via audiobook. It was well narrated by a Kenyan, thank God, because there have been Kenyan books I've listened to which have been narrated by someone from another nationality, and it was a terrible listen. I did enjoy it, I suppose, and the hour I listened to it while doing my makeup, but I think Ngugi wa Thiong'o can write a better description of darkness than darker that is darker than darkness, is how it was described. This is a man who is winning, or is it being nominated for Booker prizes, mind you, so okay. Descendants of the First by Irene K. Amayo. This, I enjoyed the first book, and I have a full review which I gushed over this book and the characters and the world and everything. I still like it. The world building that was in the first book is not lost, like it continues in this. But I think the characters that I came to know and love in the first book have no idea what they're doing here. and there was an infusion of too many antagonists. When we had one in the first one, and then in this one, it's like it's like Amayo lost the direction of where she's taking these people and what is their goal, what is the end goal at this trilogy, and what is the bigger picture, I think was lost in this. So I also think it suffered from middle book syndrome. So as much as I really like this world, and I'm thinking it'll be wrapped well, but this particular one just suffered from a middle book syndrome. Although the worlds that were introduced were as beautiful as in the first book, but it just stayed stagnant. Fevered Star by Rebecca Rowan Horse is another book which I think suffered a middle book syndrome. This is the sequel to Black Sun. I don't know what the series is called. Between Us and Sky. I still loved the characters that I loved from book one. This does the job of expanding the world building and showing you the very rich world set in pre-America. I still enjoyed, Serapio. Somebody asked who is my book boyfriend. I guess Serapio fits the bill. But, we still had Naranpa, who I dislike, and I still dislike in this book, although maybe her arc was made a tiny bit more interesting. And Giala was inexplicably made a love interest, so her only character, the only thing in her head was just to advance Serapio, and I found that a bit disappointing, because in the first book she was her own self, she had her own things to worry about, and now her whole identity was wrapped up in somebody else, while Serapio, who loves her, he loves her immensely, yes, but his arc is still singular. Like, he still has his own, duties and responsibilities and his goal. So I don't know what happened with Giala. I am still going to be here for the third book, but that was a failing in this book. The fifth season by N.K. Jemisin. I've already said how much I loved this book. I have gushed over this book, and in N.K. Jemisin, I found a new favorite author. Please, if you don't believe the hype, like me, I usually don't like just read books. Like, as you can see from my channel, I don't read many popular books, or if I do read popular books, they're like in a very specific niche. This was a revelation, I think, and I think it's something that has stood out from the crowd of books set in kingdoms with kings and princesses and heirs to thrones and all that. This is a book that is based on geology, and it's both sci-fi and fantasy, and I really enjoyed this world. The Scum Villain's Self-Saving System by Mo Xiang Tongshu is what you would call in anime an isekai, or in this is a danmei that has the transmigration trope, which a character from the real world is suddenly dumped into a game, or a web novel in this case. And this is one of the, Mo Xiang Tongshu has done 3 series so far, and this is her first one when she was, I think, 19. So the fans like to call this the black sheep of Mo Xiang Tongshu's works, and it does really reflect that the plot is just so wacky and the characters are unhinged, but that is why we keep reading Mo Xiang Tongshu, because you can find some good quotes, good writing in there, even when the plot is absolutely ridiculous. But it's just the poetry of it, the culture, and it's totally fantasy, but it's just a good introduction into danmei and into Chinese web novels in general. So I highly, maybe not, I recommend Heaven Official's Blessings first, but I still recommend this because this is just crack on paper. This is How You Lose the Taimo by Amal El Motar and Max Gladstone. is a sci-fi romance that is about two characters called Blue and Red who write to each other across space and time, and they try to find each other. At first, it's like a enemies to lovers sort of story, and they race against time, and they also try to find each other across time. And this was just a beautiful, epic romance. It wasn't quite romance, it was more sci-fi than romance. I mean, the plot is vague, so I think I would call it more a romance than a sci-fi. But I really loved it because the writing is so lyrical, and the quotes I can lift from this is just, phenomenal. I would describe the writing like music. Like, these characters were just speaking to each other's soul, and man, it's not for everyone, to everyone's taste though, because it's just vibes. It's just vibes and very beautiful writing, and I didn't enjoy that in other books, but I immensely enjoyed it in this book. The Vampire Queen's Servant by Joy W. Hill. This is part of the Vampire Queen series, and I would say this is a very intense BDSM themed novel. I don't recommend it lightly. It's very tough to read at some points. It's basically BDSM with no safe words because vampires are involved. And Joy Hill is not an easy writer to read, but she manages to balance the hard stuff with emotions, with connection, so that that more intense stuff is even more intense because there are emotions involved, because there's some psychology, some twisted psychology involved, and it feels so raw and vulnerable. There's something vulnerable in it, but it's not an easy read, so I don't recommend this lightly. Let me say, if you read 50 Shades of Grey or Sylvia Day, this is multiplied by 1,000, by 100,000. Like, this is not for the weak. So just don't go in here thinking, oh, some spicy dark stuff. No, it's really, really intense. King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. Now, why did we did Leigh Bardugo, how many times have I called your name? Like, we did not need this book, although maybe we did, because the reason I picked this was because of the success of the Six of Crows duology, and this was nothing like that, because I can't believe Ravka is still a boring place. Fierda is still as cold and as misogynistic as always. Like, I didn't end up caring about Nikolai and Zoya and Nina, and I thought this would be the book that I would, because if you have written such wonderful characters in Six of Crows, surely the new characters you want to focus on would be as colorful. But alas, Leigh Bardugo just only likes 3 characters in this whole universe she has created, and Nikolai and Zoya were just pale in comparison, because the stakes, I don't think, were high enough. If there's no good characters, then there should be a good plot, but even that did not exist. And I think maybe I shouldn't judge too harshly because it's a YA, but Six of Crows felt also distinctly like a YA, something that is written for teenagers and young adults. And the characters here are in their 20s, but it was still giving Shadow of Bone, which is unfortunate because Shadow of Bone, in my opinion, was a very terrible series, and I can't believe that we returned there. So I suggest that Bardugo should keep her hands off this universe and continue with whatever she's been doing, because I hear that it's being very successful. But I think after this is where me and Bardugo will just cut ties, because I can't do this anymore. The last on my list is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This is a very cute romance about a big city doctor who meets a small town bed and breakfast owner, and they fall in love. And it was sweet, but I think a bit maybe too saccharine, because I didn't feel any tension between the main characters, and I thought that it needed a bit more spice. I think I am getting a bit tired of books that have this Cinderella trope. You want to tell me that this man runs a bed and breakfast but doesn't know how to use the same tools, meaning the internet, to sell his art. I mean, sure, he's never thought about doing that, but like, so the rich girl comes to teach him how to sell his art, sells it to her rich friends, and now in the end, when he becomes somewhat successful, he can like cross the social class over to you and be on your level as a rich doctor. I don't know, these days those kinds of stories give me the ache. I think something that is actually being done very well is the Netflix series, The Interest of Love. And I feel like as I've grown up, that is something I can digest more than the Cinderella bit. Of course, I mean, we read the romance to get away from our lives and shut the brain off. But, you know, sometimes I wish that we had a bit of realism in there and a bit more better analysis of how a relationship that crosses social classes would look like. So that is all the 17 books I read in 2022. I hope this wasn't too long. You could, just listen to it if you can't watch all of it, if you've reached this far, that is. Please like and share and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.